When you're riding, does it sometimes feel like there's a bit of a chain reaction going on between your aids? As in, you do one thing or you ask with one aid, and then everything else just starts moving by itself, and you're like, no, don't be moving. Well, independent aids are really, really important. We know this as riders. However, developing them, that can be a little bit trickier, hey? But today I want to talk about how you can begin to develop your aids so as they are all independent and working alone, because that's how we need them when we want them to all eventually work in harmony together with each other. Let's dive in. Hey there, and welcome to the Daily Strides podcast. My name is Lorna Leeson. I'm an equestrian trainer and coach, and I help riders from all over the world work through lots of different issues that they have in their riding so that they can make the most out of their time with their horse, especially if they don't have a trainer to work with. Okay, so we're talking about independent aids, and you know as well as I do that this is an important concept. We need aids to be pretty independent if we are to ride correctly and ride in a way that what we're saying is clear and, I suppose, easily understood by our horse, okay? And yet, for each of your aids to work in a way that they can all then work together to create this kind of whole conversation, each aid first, I believe, has to be developed independently of the others, okay? So you need to be able to, for example, okay, you need to be able to move your leg without your arm moving along with it. Or you need to be able to move your elbow without your lower leg scrunching up as well, okay? There's lots of different ways that you see this with people. And I really, really think that when you can take the time to strengthen each aid in its own right, then you can allow it to contribute more, if you want, effectively to the whole team effort that your aids are. Because at the end of the day, never is a big word, but you would very rarely, I don't know if there's an instance, let's put it that way, that you would just use a single aid, okay? It's always a combination of aids. It's always that your aids are working together to actually create the conversation with your horse, okay? So how well, for example, could you use your left leg without moving your right leg at the same time? So if I said to you to move your left leg back, could you do that, but at the same time be able to maintain the right leg? Or maybe with you, it could be the inside hand, that when you actively engage and you're communicating with your horse, maybe with your inside hand, if you're asking a question using it to support or something, that your inside leg wants to automatically chime in and be like, well, I'm here too to the conversation, okay, without any invitation from you to do so, okay. When we can't easily move one body part, okay, without unconsciously moving another, there is no way that we could say that our aids are independent of each other. And that is a challenge that so many riders have initially until they begin to develop each aid in its own right and then put them together, okay? So it all comes together to create that more cohesive conversation with the horse, okay? Now, I think that when you're working on your aids, you should rather start on the more obvious aids first, okay? And this could be like the hands and the legs. And what I would do is if I was working with you together, I would start saying, isn't it interesting that every time X happens, Y tends to happen right along with it, okay? And so often riders don't actually realize it's happening until it's pointed out. It's like somebody tells them, or they begin to actually go back through videos of themselves riding or even photographs, and they begin to actually notice these things, okay? So it is important to be aware that independent aids are not a given. Independent aids are something that we need to work on first, okay? And then from there, they develop independence. Now, I mentioned there the obvious and the subtle, okay? So I really do think that all of our aids can be grouped very loosely into two kind of different categories. And You have the more obvious ones. They would be the ones that I would see if you were riding. Like, they're obvious, Captain Obvious. You can see them. You can see the person doing the thing, okay? It's like, oh, look, they moved their leg. Oh, look, they lifted their hand. They opened their hand, okay? Whatever it is, there are things that you can see. Now, you could say that your voice could also kind of fall into this, okay? I don't know. Yes, it can and it can't. I think the voice really is kind of almost like a standalone, and I think it could be used either way. I think the voice is really, it's an important aid that if we work on it, it can be like a really great support to all the other aids, okay? So also, when you're just starting out as a rider, your obvious aids are usually the ones that you're going to rely on the most, okay? They're the ones that, like, riding instructors who are working with beginners, they're the ones they focus on, okay? Now, your subtle aids, over time, they will become stronger, and they will also, over time, actually begin to have a greater role in the whole conversation. So remember I said where initially beginners would focus on the obvious aids? Well, then over time, that then begins to transition across. So as the focus actually becomes on the more subtle aids, okay? Now, these would be your weight, your seat, your thoughts. And again, we could argue about the voice either way, okay? But what is important here is that they're not something that a casual observer is going to be able to like pick up on. You know, they'd be like, oh, look, there was a slight shift there in her seat. No, they won't notice that because they don't know what they're looking for, okay? So it is important to understand that the subtle aids will eventually create that kind of secret conversation between you and your horse. And that's where you can really, the independent aids, they have to be there to support that conversation as it goes forward. So as I mentioned, start with the obvious one. What I would suggest doing is the next time you're in the saddle, ask your horse to walk a 15-meter circle in the walk, okay? And spend a few strides there, just making sure that you're obviously in the right space. Remember, your aids will only work as well as the position that you are in when you're applying the aids. If you're applying the aids from the wrong position, it doesn't matter how well they were applied, they won't work, okay? Or they'll mean something different, okay? So make sure you're sitting pretty, hey? Like check your lines, head, shoulder, hip, heel, and also the elbow, wrist, thumb, rein, bit, okay? Those two lines, make sure you've got two lovely straight lines. And then you want to check that you've kind of got this flow of energy, that really you are sitting in the correct place to facilitate a channel or a flow of energy. And if you think about your aids as kind of really just keeping this energy flowing along, okay? Now, when you're on the circle, you can begin asking for an appropriate level of bend or flexion through your horse's body, bend and flexion through your horse's body while your horse is moving forward. So to do that, you actually have to use a combination of a lot of your aids. So in this case, for example, your outside leg would be slightly behind or further back than your inside leg, okay? But once you are correctly positioned, begin experimenting using a single aid without it having an effect on your other aids. So can you move that outside leg back? Are you able to do that without... I see some people when they try this and their whole body contorts in the saddle. They twist all over the place. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, we don't want to do that, okay? Can you slide or swing your outside leg back without maybe moving your hands or, as I said, tilting or twisting your upper body, okay? What about gently squeezing the outside rein, okay? So let's say you want to just a little kind of just balance a little. So you give a little squeeze using actually your fingers, the tension through your fingers, a little squeeze there of the outside rein. Can you do that without squeezing your inside leg? Or, well, squeezing, we'll use the word squeezing, but gripping up would be a better kind of an example of this. So can you use your outside hand without gripping up with the inside leg? It's weird. When you start doing this, it's amazing how many connections you'll find in your body. And of course, all riders are different, but there are certainly a lot of connections happening that we have to then almost like break or divide or kind of, not allow those things to be as connected to each other anymore, okay? Are you able to ask for over with your inside leg without shoving with your seat bone? That's another thing. I see that happening a lot. If we think about lateral work, maybe leg yielding, you'll see a lot of riders, they're not just able to ask for over. They have to physically push the horse, like shove the horse, pushing him across the arena, okay, with the over. How about asking for the canter? Can you ask for the canter just using your legs in your seat without tipping the upper body? Or, you know, I often see riders, they'll ask for canter and it looks like they themselves are trying to canter, okay? We don't want that either. So it is important, these different things. But once you really and truly spend time and first of all, you notice where potentially there are any connections with you and your body and in your riding, and then you begin working on really like singling things out to make everything independent, then you can begin to transfer that across and working on the subtle aids. And I know that seems you know, a lot of riders are like, why must I wait? Like, I want to work on my seat. I hear so much about the seat. Yet the seat won't work if everything else isn't independent, okay? And that is like the long and the short of it. It's actually, I think it's a bit of a waste of time, to be honest with you. Working on, you can kind of touch over it lightly if you want, but I think spending any great effort and energy and time working on them when you do not have independent basic aids such as the hands, the legs, the obvious aids, as I said, okay, it's not going to work. And the reason is because you have to learn to become quiet, like Q-U-I-E-T, like shh, quiet through your body in order for your subtle aids to work, in order for your seat and your weight aids. Because if you're banging and pulling and twisting and shoving and doing all the things, gripping and squeezing and doing all the things that we do, okay? First of all, you're not being very quiet. But secondly, your horse won't be able to hear the subtle aids. How can he? You're just busy doing all the things like ding, ding, bang, bang, like rub, rub, tip, 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 tip. And you're just doing everything. You're twisting, you're pulling, you're shoving, you're doing all the ingings, okay? And he cannot hear. You have to make sure that your obvious aids, okay, your extremities if you want, okay, are quiet so that he can then begin to hear when you speak with your subtle aids. And that's what it comes down to. And this is why it's important. Forget about the fancy stuff. Like people want to jump in, they're brand new and they're like, oh, I'm going to work on my half all today. That's great. You can have a good knowledge and a good basic understanding, but if you don't have independent aids and independent obvious aids, yeah, it's just not going to work because your horse can't hear you. You're shouting, you're roaring, okay? So it is worthwhile, really and truly, taking the time to really develop that first. Now, I also think that the final piece to this is actually your physical fitness. This is something that comes up so much with riders, and it's something that I don't know why so many riders have such resistance to. And people almost become a little bit defensive and sometimes they get upset and they're like, why are you saying that? Well, because it's a very physical sport, and if you want to use your body to communicate with your horse, which is basically what horse riding is, okay, let's be honest, we then need to have a certain level of control over our own body. And we do that through physical fitness. And this is why it's important to spend time not just in the saddle, but also out of the saddle so that you then have more control over your body. I cannot stress this enough. It is so, so important. When you gain more control over your own body and when you are able to then kind of understand how the aids work together to ask different questions, you are naturally going to be more effective in your communication with your horse. That's it. There's no beating around the bush. That's the long and the short of it. But so many people just aren't willing to put the time into doing that. Now, previous years, I have had the 30-day Rider Fitness Challenge, and then I had the Equestrian Fitness Challenge. And I'm going to be honest, I haven't done it since 2021. My word. It has been a wild few years, folks, but you know what? This year, 2024, we are getting back into it. However, it's going to be a little bit different. It is the Equestrian Fitness Challenge 2024, but it's a walking challenge because, you know, I just love walking. I'm a walker, eh? I would walk anywhere. Pretty sure I could walk from here to Ireland if I set my mind to it. I just love walking. And I'm in South Africa at the moment, by the way. But I love it. I think it's great. And if you are keen to join me in this challenge, it's not starting immediately. It will be mid-May when we kick this off and we get going. But you can go over to equestrianfitnesschallenge.com and you can sign up there. You can also, of course, go to 30dayriderfitnesschallenge.com. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to ask a horsey friend to do this with you. So send the link on to a horsey friend so that they can get signed up as well. What I'm going to do, we're going to run this for 21 days, 3 weeks, us together, okay? Every day, audio programs for you to listen to as you walk. And all we're going to do is talk about all of the things horsing and riding and getting you just more understanding of what you're doing as a rider. We're going to be talking mindset. We're going to be talking all of the things. I'm so excited for this. I can't wait. And I hope that you do decide to join me there. equestrianfitnesschallenge.com. Get on the wait list. Share it with all your horsey friends. Let's go. We can do this. I think we can all do it together. I think if nothing else, getting out in a bit of fresh air. Oh, and by the way, you can do this. Okay, I'm just going to preface this. I hear a lot of people say, I can't get out and walk because of like weather or maybe the time of day when you get home, it's already dark or whatever, okay? I understand that they are definite things that happen. But what I'm going to suggest then is that you just have a room, Like a room. And you can walk around your room. Is it going to be interesting? Not as much as going outside, but hey, if we need to move and if we're going to move our body in a way that's going to be helpful, if we're going to learn how to be better riders, how to be better communicators with our horses, this is it. equestrianfitnesschallenge.com. Can't wait. So excited. Okay, I'll see you there. Be good. Bye.